The broadcast is now starting. All attendees
Hello,
are in
everybody,
listen-only
and
mode.
thank you for joining us for today's webinar. Today's webinar will be Reemployment and Recareering Before the Resume. And today's webinar is presented by Seton Hall's Career Center and Alumni Relations Department. My name is Sean, and I'll be moderating today's session. Our presenter today is Bob Franco from the Career Center, and he'll introduce himself in just a bit, but I just want to give you guys some reminders about our webinar. At any moment, you can raise your hand using GoToWebinar, and I will contact you to figure out if there's any technical issues you're having. If you have any questions about the content of the presentation, you can use the question section of GoToWebinar to ask us a question, and we'll address it as the webinar is going on. And there will also be time at the end of the webinar to ask any questions you may have that maybe we didn't cover. So, and also just keep in mind the slides and the audio may be slightly delayed from one another, but if you don't mind being patient, it'll only be a few seconds. So, without further ado, I present to you guys Bob Franco.
Thank you, Sean. I'm proud of you guys who have signed up for this webinar today, because it's a strange title, Reemployment and Recareering Before the Resume. It's not really clear what it is that all means, and I think that serves as a point of how we look at the whole job search process. Is immediately we go to thinking about resume and interview and networking, and we cover those in other webinars as well. But there is that time just in the beginning when it's time to take a step back and think about what's next. And there's not a whole lot of content out there about what that means and how you should be approaching that. So you'll see our themes that we'll cover over the time we are together here. Terms like reemployment, recareer, job shift. We all have different reasons for being on this call today. I'm not going to have a ton of content for you, so when you see something that's personal to you, please feel free to ask a question. One of the things about unemployment, and I'm going to use that word specifically, it gets us nervous. It's like, oh no, I'm unemployed. But the flip side of unemployment is that it's a time to sort of think things through, and depending on where you are in your career, if you're early career, mid-career, late career, but it is a time to some breathing space, a time to ask yourself, what do I really want to do for the next couple of years, for the short term, the midterm, the long term? It really gives us a chance to step back. I can say from personal experience, I've probably made one major error in terms of, my career path and planning. And it was because I went right to okay, I lost my job, let me, apply right away and get my resume out there. And what happens is the things that may have led to you, being unemployed in the first place, you're still going to be in that pattern. And you may end up getting yourself into a situation which is very similar to the one you just left. And you start getting into this cycle of having a job, not having a job, having a job, not having a job. It's good to just take a step back and really start to think about what are my options. There's a lot of reasons why people are recareering and looking for a job or shifting, and this is particularly focused on late career folks. Surveys have been done, which sort of say, well, why is it that the 55 plus, the 60 plus generation are still in the market? A large percentage of them, 22%, are just bored of the idea of retirement. It's not your parents' retirement anymore. Retirement's very active now, so that's a part of it. 21% said that just this feeling, this need to continue being productive. 20% said needing to have an intellectual challenge. 13% just the need to have some personal interaction. And then also 13% was this idea of, life is expensive and, I don't have enough sufficient savings for my lifestyle or for my retirement, etc. What are the types of things that these populations are looking to? Well, particularly at the executive level, you see many of them moving towards the idea of entrepreneurial, consulting, volunteering, or some combination of multiple pursuits. I mean, you may like the idea of being an entrepreneur, but you may not want to go through the big chore of starting a company and going through the legal channels and things like that. So you may have some combinations of these things as you go through your thought process. Also, when you consider all of those things, it's sort of acting like a free agent, where you're sort of asking the question, what's out there for me? What kind of work can I do and will I do? Again, for those who are mid to late career, you may find that your industries or your job functions continue to change and change and change. So the way you're looking at yourself about what your skill sets and what have you are may not be the way the market is looking at your skill sets. In some ways, to kind of oversimplify it, we tend to overvalue ourselves and the market tends to undervalue us, and that's sort of the quandary of job search. But knowing that, there's a plus side to that, well, maybe I could think about what else is out there. What's my best fit? You'll have your things that must be a part of your future, and you have the things that you refuse to have as a part of your future, but it's good to kind of go through that whole thought process. Now, the realities of it. If somebody decides to go whole out for a job search and basically are looking for the same job or the same job title in the same type of company or industry, of course, that's the easiest way to approach your job search, because it's clear. You were this last month and you're going to be this next month. Very often when folks choose, when they're in this unemployment situation, this transitional state, they say, well, I would like to try something different. So, I can go teach. I used to be a CFO. Now I'd like to go, teach business in high school or college or whatever. That's difficult because that's probably the hardest thing to do, is have a completely different job in a completely different industry, because that industry doesn't recognize you. You seem odd or out there. You're out of pattern. And it does take more time. It's not that it's impossible. I mean, I'm somebody who's made those kinds of shifts personally. I grew up in the corporate world. I worked for big companies in human resources and recruiting and training and development. And I was a lead HR person. I was in an executive role. Now I'm sitting in an academic institution, which is very, very different, right? That wasn't easy, because when people looked at me, I didn't look like the profile of the type of person who comes in to an institution like this. But opening up my network, talking to people, learning more about it, eventually you can pull it off, but it takes a lot of patience. And in that, you can't be saying, well, I'm taking a different title in a different industry, and I am worth X dollars, because your old industry might see it one way and your new industry might see it another way. Your past salary when you're in transition may have little or nothing to do with what your future salary might be. So those are more considerations for you to think about. So if you look at this chart, there's different varying levels of difficulty in terms of career shifting. So to do that, it's important to, as we're thinking about shifting, and again, having personally been through this, it's learning the culture of something that's just new, a new industry or approach or culture, and learning about what are the skills that are sought in that new venture that you might have in mind, and understand that there's transferability of what you used to do in the past versus what you could do in the future. For example, in training and development, for me, when I was at American Express, it was really getting folks to move from point A to point B, to come through a training or developmental exercise, and at the end of that, be able to perform differently or position yourself for new opportunities and whatever. That's clearly a transferable skill coming into an academic institution where I do that with students all day, every day. I see it very, very clearly. It took more time for the organization to see it, and that's just something you need to know. Yes.
So we got a question here. If you do fall into the square, different job, different role, how do you strategically transition and show that you have transferable skills? Will you speak on more specifics than networking?
More specifics than networking?
Yeah.
Well, the bad news is that networking is the answer. So I can give you some, just a quick example. So my last company, when it sort of went out of, it was in terrible financial difficulty, and eventually, it had to close down. So it put me out there. There I was, in my, 50s, thinking about maybe it's time to do something different. And I started it was always in the back of my mind that the academic world would be a possibility. My network was very small. In fact, when I thought through my contacts, it was one. I remembered one professor who I hadn't seen in 30 years. Think about that. So what did I do? I sent an email, contacted him. By some stroke of luck, he remembered me. And then we went back and forth with a couple of emails, and I started to position what I thought I could probably do in the academic world. Again, I didn't know titles and departments or anything along that. I had to learn. And he sent me over to, at that time, the person who was the head of career services at Rutgers. And that person was gracious enough to give me a 30-minute meeting. And I went and spoke with him. And he was very clear that my background was not typical. In fact, he gave me all the reasons why I was the wrong guy and there'd be no way I could ever get a job in a place like that. But I had to chip away and say, well, I'm not talking about jobs today. I am actually in reality networking. So I asked him questions about him, his job, his challenges, things that he's working on, and what keeps him awake at night, and then presented to him examples of where I did the exact same thing back in my corporate life. And they, of course, threw but you're not going to make any money here and blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, look, it's more than zero. And that's what I'm at right now. And I'm really serious about this. And at the end of that conversation, he made a comment, well, you might be one of the exceptions to the rule. That's huge. So you're one of the exceptions means I struck a chord. And as a result of that, he reiterated that he had no jobs at the time and probably no interest in me at the time. But he did open up his network to me. And then I had that same conversation in schools throughout the state. It's hard work. But you know what? If I had sent him a resume and didn't have that conversation, he never would have pulled me out of the pile ever. So those when you're in career shifting, the post and hope thing is frustrating. It's really about getting out there and understanding, what they're looking for, and the only way to do that is by meeting people and doing your homework and doing your research. So in a way, to know that, let's kind of go to the next slide here. Oops, I don't want to do that yet. So, so I hope that answers your question around, what to do. It's really knowing what you are interested in doing and then having that positioning conversation. I hope that answered your question, his or her question. Now, let's kind of continue down that vein of this idea that there are many people like me, probably like people on the phone right now, who have tons of skills. And we keep hearing that there's not enough people out there to do the jobs. And on the one hand, we have all these job openings that are out there, that we know we can do, and you have the employers, on the other hand, saying there's not anybody out there who can do our jobs. It's a strange dynamic that's happening right now. In fact, this is probably good for people who are more senior in their career, but just like the example I used with the gentleman at Rutgers, it is work. It is work to get them to see what your value is. I'll give you a quick example. So, cybersecurity. Let's use that one. That's a big thing right now. In 2017, there were 70,000 posted cybersecurity jobs. There were 66,000 individuals who had the proper certification to do that. And by the way, it takes 5 years to get certified. So that's an example of a gap. So if technology is something that interests me, I would take a look at that and say, this is a good play for me. How do I get myself on the road to certification? So that's a pretty clear, stark example. There's actually clearly a deficit right now in that. Taking that one step further, data science jobs are growing incredibly fast. Everybody's looking for that role. However, it doesn't necessarily have to be a data science job, but it's skill sets. It's data skill sets that they're looking for. So you'll see right now in finance, insurance, healthcare, social services, manufacturing, retail, supply chain, school administration, a requirement for these jobs are now data science skills. Titles like business analyst, data analyst, software engineer, financial analyst, business analyst, but marketing manager. I've seen many marketing jobs pass through I've seen many of these come through, and I'm looking at the credentials. Basic marketing jobs that are things like building audience awareness, things that are traditional marketing jobs that a traditional marketing person would do, and yet the skills that they're looking for are things like analytics, math, physics, engineering, information technology. So knowing that, as if I'm trying to position myself to work in marketing and communication and what have you, I may need to look at things like Python and SQL and Hadoop or R language or Hive or data visualization or any of these programs, whether it be systemic or individual programs that are out there. How do I tool myself to be ready for these opportunities? Coding skills are now required in 50% of top quartile jobs. So this is jobs that are $70,000 or more, basically your average middle class lifestyle. Data has become incredibly fundamental to those roles. And many of these data science jobs are filled by what traditionally was called liberal arts majors, and it's amazing how much additional income you can get just by being more quantitative. Early career, on average, $17,000 of early career starting salary just by adding data science into your field of passion. A quick example, psychology majors. 2017, the average psychology major on the market, I'm saying average across all psychology jobs, $42,000 was the average salary. If you added marketing and business onto the person's credentialing, that 42 went up to $44,000. Not a heck of a lot. If you added data science, it went up to $69,000. Just really incredible. So this is something that's good to know. If you're in communications or broadcasting or media, you probably know this, but in 2017, IBM Watson was basically, was the one that helped out with fan experience and generated highlight reels. And that was at the 2017 Wimbledon championships. Pretty interesting. And so if Wimbledon did it, you can make sure that it's going to bleed into the Soccer World Cup or the NBA Finals or the Super Bowl or the World Series. Eventually, it's going to continue to move down that path. What is that? That's nothing more than coding, right? It's coding. What is the key moment of a match? And, how do you know what's more important than the other? 40-40 is better than 40-0 in terms of intensity, et cetera, things like that. So really, as you start to go through your pre-job search to-dos, It might be good to know what skills you're bringing to the party, but also what additional skills can you maybe add, in terms of identifying your current and potentially future career assets, and learning the language of your new job or your new industry that you're trying to get into. You can certainly improve your credibility. I mean, one of the things that really helped me out, as shifting into academia, was a lot of the language that they used was very similar to the language that we used in the learning and development field in the corporate world. And networking, I am in LinkedIn all the time. I'm there when I'm looking to set up events here at Seton Hall. I'm constantly looking to find old contacts and what have you. It's a critical tool, probably the best database available in terms of business and networking. Somehow, how do you learn how to present your skills to the employer in a way that demonstrates you understand them and you understand what their problems are and how you could meet their needs? So look into the future and begin with the end in mind so that you know how to present yourself as you're doing these shifting from one career to another. With all of that, it's the stump speech. It's like how do you frame yourself? What are the one or two words that you use that says this is what I'm good at? Is it data analytics? Is it client acquisition? What is it? I'm using the word stump speech because it is a political exercise that you're going through. You're getting people to see things your way, and you're trying to organize the research into a campaign, and then you're finding the openings, and you're, like any sales job, you find the energy to sell all the time and have this conversation with as many people as you can meet, and continue that energy in how you present yourself in your interview process, or possibly even in your resume as you get really good at flipping into that transferable skill mindset. Now, a little bit on the stump speech. Having been in a middle executive role, you get the person who's always trying to contact you. Can I get in your calendar for coffee, and on and on. And what happens is I get the speech. I get the speech, which is sometimes they call it the elevator speech, or they'll say 30 seconds, 90 seconds. When you are in that situation where you're listening to somebody speak for 90 seconds about themselves, it's in a way it's very impersonal, and the receiver doesn't always appreciate it, especially when they've heard it 50, 100, 150 times. So keeping your stump speech short, I like 15 seconds, so that you can do it real quick, and ask questions back and forth. Include the person. So it's not a presentation; it's a conversation where you tell a little bit about yourself, and you include your the person you're meeting with in the conversation as quickly as possible, because you're trying to build a relationship. Your stump speech could include, your stump conversation could include an overview, things of what you've done, what you're good at, what kind of accomplishments that you have. While you're in transition, this is something you really got to work on. So when I was able to kind of say that, my company had financial difficulties and they had to let go most of their management staff, that's a reasonable answer. Be comfortable saying that and move on. What you're looking for and how you add value. Have these, that you don't have to present all of this in one shot. You're presenting this over the course of a conversation, which could be 15 minutes, a half an hour, whatever. Keep posing questions, to keep the listener engaged. So by doing this, again, talking about, it's really, unfortunately, all about networking. You're trying to expand, your network. That guy at Rutgers was a valuable contact for me because it turned into 5, 6, 7 other contacts, and he gave me some really valuable advice. It also, helped me stay in top, kind of focus, based on what I learned in that conversation. What should I be applying for? What are the job boards saying? Are there any events out there that I should be attending. Generating different creative alternatives about different routes that I might be able to add value. So are you there now?
No, we're good.
All right. So, I sort of with some caution say, 4 out of 5 applicants do start their whole job search online. The job boards are extremely useful. You can kind of learn what people are looking for, what skills, etc. So they're very useful, but when you're in transition, they seem less useful. They're more of a research board for you than they are actually a place to apply for jobs. I'm not saying don't apply, but it's more frustrating when you're trying to apply for something that you haven't been in the past. It's better to meet people and try to move that along. Most jobs are found through what's called the hidden market. It's having conversations like the one that I mentioned. I believe the statistic is only 3% of jobs are actually posted online anyway. So it's these informal connections that you make. What I would say is they call it getting the job before it's open. That's really the point, because most hiring managers don't want to go through this arduous task of going through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of resumes. If they have somebody, they can post a job for a day or two, take it off, and move forward. And there are a lot of promoting people in place, succession planning that people do inside companies. So those are all not included in open jobs. So again, most jobs are not posted.
We have a question.
Yes, please.
So this person, she's young in her career, graduated in 2013. She said, I've seen the company I work for currently go through several reorganizations. While I am fortunate to still have a job, I am interested in learning more about how to identify our transferable skills. Any advice on how to take a step back and think about the skills you have and how that is transferable?
Okay. Great question. Thanks for dragging me back to the early career. And I will tell you, 5-year mark is the first critical mark of a career. So again, depending on what your background is, whether you've had 1 job or 2 jobs or 3 jobs in that 5-year period, but assuming there's been some growth, you've put yourself on a path, so that's good. If your accomplishments and quantitative accomplishments are clear, whether it be on the customer acquisition side or whether it be on the financial side or quality improvement side or whatever it is, you're on a track. So you're actually an important commodity right now on the market. However, if it's hard to talk quantitatively about your outputs at the 5-year mark, you're now competing against your 2017 and 2018 grads. That's the first danger point, is that 5-year part. By this point, you have to say, have I differentiated myself in terms of quantitative lift and value to my current employer? If the answer is yes, great. If the answer is I'm not sure, then we should talk. We should make an appointment and talk about how to do that. Because if you flatten out at that 5-year mark, it could have long-term ramifications. So that's a really important question that you're asking, and I'd love to have a personal conversation on that one. Yes, so it is a numbers game. There's no doubt, and that's just one of the realities today. So like any sales activity, you got to find leads. The general rule of thumb is you should be able to generate about 100 leads per month, but you can't do that by yourself. It's not just about the job boards. It's, you got to find the network to help you do that. And especially if you're in career transition, if you get an interview, forget the job, offer that might come down the road. If somebody looks at your resume and calls you in for an interview, that is a positive. That is, you've got to pat yourself on the back and say, I did something right. Very small percentage of the resumes that you send out turn into interviews. So that's a really important thing to know. And also, getting a second interview, a follow-up interview, that increases your odds dramatically. And, if that happens, you should absolutely pat yourself on the back and say you've done something right. Now, as you go through the process and you become a finalist, that's where, presenting your background is still important. But now when you're going into the close, and I'm using that sales term on purpose, is to make your close, the hiring manager, who acts like a buying person, who acts like the customer, is basically saying, all right, so I think when I put my money down on this product, I'm very confident that I'm going to get the lift and the payout, right? The close has to be very precise. And you'll get better and better at that over time. But I tell you, that getting to the close, you should be very proud of yourself for getting to that aspect of it. So it's about personal discipline. It's about creating a plan. It's about creating leads. It's about setting up meetings and future meetings. One of the questions I get constantly from people is, so I met person X, and what's a good time to follow up? Well, I'm talking about networking right now. When should I follow up? And honestly, if you're networking properly and you're getting the advice that you need from the person you're networking with, you should set up your second meeting during your first meeting. With things like, thank you for this advice. Would you mind if I followed up with you in 2, 3, 4 weeks, whatever you decide, to give you an update? Maybe I might have other questions. Set up the second meeting in the first meeting. Set up the third meeting in the second meeting. Keep the networking going. Obviously, you have less control over that when you actually apply for a job and you're dealing with recruiters and processes and things like that. But keep that going. One of the things that are extremely valuable is to set a schedule, a weekly schedule with goals. The 10-to-1 rule, meaning for every 10 jobs that I apply to, let's say online, I must meet one person face-to-face or have a conversation by phone, make a personal contact, 10-to-1 ratio. And then when you set your goals, you're going to say something like, well, I plan on making 30 applications a week and make 3 personal contacts a week. But make sure you keep that 10-to-1 ratio. And whatever goal you set for yourself, make sure you hit that goal every week. I've seen people bring that as high as 100 jobs a week and 10 personal outreaches. That's very hard to do. I think I personally have gotten as high as maybe the 30 and 3. And you set milestones for yourself about how many jobs, etc., that you might be applying for, and set measures for yourself, and track your goals. We all have our own version of this, but create a little action log for yourself. It says, what date did I apply? What was the name of the employer? Who was my contact point? What was the result of that thing? Just go through all that so you can keep track. Some of these will be more likely to have a follow-up work to your advantage. Sometimes you'll just hear radio silence and you'll never hear from anybody. So, but judge those things as you go through. As soon as you apply for a job, as soon as you go on an interview, as soon as you do anything, keep focusing on the next thing that you're going to look for. Just because one early stage interview went well doesn't mean stop generating more alternatives and more leads. Always keep pushing forward. When you're doing your own personal research, there are some questions you always want to ask yourself. Who are the decision makers? Who's going to make the final decision? What are their goals? Where is their business going? Where is it now? The position that you're talking about, that you're applying for, how is it related to their goal attainment? Learn that so that you can position yourself, more directly. Do what you can to learn about cultural issues in the organizations, why things don't happen. Indeed or Glassdoor or many other sites can tell you a little bit about the culture of a company. So take a look at those things, read about them. How do they define success? What performance measures that they use? It's really good to know that stuff early on so that you can always position yourself as, if it's a particular measure that you've had an impact on in your own past, then that's going to be a key selling point, as you go through your process. All right. Basically, how does the company know that you will be their answer? Now, I've sort of been alluding to this. Your network is not going to have immediate needs. Is not going to leads for you. It's not going to pay out right away. I mean, that conversation I had at Rutgers was 9 months prior to me getting a job offer at Seton Hall. So it does take time. But again, if I didn't have those conversations, I never would have ended up at Seton Hall. There's no way it would happen. So that's good to know. Even when you're dealing with recruiters, they may not call you right away. I mean, I honestly have seen people called 6 months, 10 months, after applying for a position. So your time frames and their time frames are different. Just know that. You don't want to get frustrated, and you also don't want to dwell on one particular situation. You want to keep generating alternatives, be creative, keep pushing forward, and take action. If in doubt, if you have any questions in your mind, the best thing you can do today is take an action, move forward, apply for a job, make a phone call, send a LinkedIn message out, something that moves you forward. So things that we didn't cover today, these things here, the interview process, the impact of social media, your resume, salary negotiation, personal branding, these kinds of things I didn't cover. You can certainly go to my YouTube page and you can look at those, or we can talk about these things offline. Feel free. The purpose of today was talking about what to do prior to going down the path of the application process. And know that when you're in transition, when you leave a job, you're in that blurry gray space where you're not where you used to be. You're no longer what you were, but you're not where you're going. You're somewhere in the middle. And that is called transition, and it's gray and it's messy, and sometimes it's hard to define where you are. That's why this idea of setting goals and moving forward and taking actions on a day-to-day basis is so important. The last thing I want to say, and then we can open up for final questions, is this idea of big and small W. This idea of what is my work? What is this need to balance all of the things that are going on in my life? I mean, I was tied up in that whole 9/11 mess that happened downtown New York when I was at American Express, and it did force me to kind of deal with, who am I? If I walk into a conference where I have a name tag that says Bob Franco, American Express Vice President, people want to talk to me. If you take away American Express and you take away Vice President, you just write Bob Franco, fewer people want to talk to me. So that forces you to really think about this. And when I did leave Amex, and my kids were just, hitting their kindergarten ages and things like that, I had to kind of play this all out to say, well, what do I want my life to look like? My work, my family, myself. And this idea of work and family, it feels so fragmented to me that I'm two different people, one at work and one at home. And I actually never bought into that. But if I were to buy into that, I would say that people miss the most important thing. It's work and family, but it's also self. And when I left Amex and I started to kind of say, well, what would happen if everybody I knew was no longer around me and I was by myself? What would make me happy? And I started to join things and participate in things that were me, that were just for my own personal selfish things that I liked, whether it be helping a local program in the town or volunteering for something I enjoyed doing. Very important. And you start to see a lot of the things that you learn in your career, you can apply for so many parts in your life. I ran a soup kitchen for a couple of years, and it was fun. And the only reason I was successful at it was because I was a great project manager, which I learned how to do in the corporate world. I ran a basketball league, I ran a baseball league, I ran the Boy Scouts, and all of my corporate skills helped me do that, which was fantastic. And I differentiate this big W versus small W. Small W is your task. It's the job that you're doing, the thing that you're working on, the company that you're working on. Big W is the thing that you would do in any circumstance. It's that one thing that you really love doing all the time. For me, I love being in situations where there's change, where we're trying to innovate, move things forward. I can do that as a Boy Scout leader. I can do that as a corporate executive. I can do that as a professor at Seton Hall, or as a career center advisor. I can fit that into everything. And what I did learn is focusing too much on the specific job and job description was not necessarily beneficial to me, particularly late career. It was, what were the things that I could bring to any job? That definition, like, what is a bob? If you went to a store to buy one of those bob things, what are you really getting? What is the main advantage that you're getting from it? And that's big W, right? It's the thing that you do all the time. So I wanted to throw that out there. It was a great life lesson for me, and I've actually continued to bring that thought process even throughout my time here at Seton Hall. So that's really all I had to cover today, Sean. So
we have a question.
Please
here.
have them come in.
How many hours on average would you try to dedicate to finding a new job, given a 40-hour work week, commuting, and family life?
Well, you got to be realistic. So, how much, if all of those things are locked in, the question is, are you really looking for a job? Is that really something that you're able to do right now? If I had, I've been in that circumstance. By the way, I had a full-time job and a family, and I did all of those things I just mentioned. I was the head of HR for a medium-sized company just before coming to Seton Hall, where I was managing that soup kitchen, the Boy Scouts, the basketball team, multiple teams, baseball, recreation baseball, and travel baseball. I was doing that all at the same time as having a full-time job where I had to travel around the country. So it's really, having a calendar and being able to manage yourself. It depends on where you prioritize. That's where I prioritized. Now, if you back all of those things out, also included in that might be, if have this 40-hour-a-week job and whatever, maybe I should focus on networking and meeting people and going to conferences, or join professional organizations and continue to network. Maybe that's it. In terms of the job board thing, I found, me personally, if you started an hour and a half a day, I think that should be your max. I think too many people will spend 8 hours on a job board and keep applying, and it feels fruitless. And I think because such a small percentage of jobs are actually posted, I would not, especially if you're in a full-time job right now, I might make that a smaller percentage of your time. But I would make a habit of saying, I'm going to meet 4 old bosses a month, or I'm going to network with colleagues. Pick a number, 4 a month, 5 a month, set a goal, and hit that goal every month. If you set the goal, hit the goal, make it a priority. Does that make sense? I hope.
It makes sense to me.
Okay.
If you guys have any more questions, we'll just stay live here for a few more minutes. So just send the questions you have. And you got to thank you.
Oh, appreciate it. This was a tough subject for me because I'm used to doing the more tangible stuff. So again, I appreciate you guys hanging tough with me, through this 45 minutes or so.
All right, so we got another question. How do you avoid financial stress during the job search?
Yeah, well, because the other person on the other side, the hiring manager, doesn't care about your financial picture, right? They only care about what can you do for them. So this is going to sound easier said than done, but anything that's not related to your job search, you got to compartmentalize. What I would say is you put them on the shelf. When folks come into my office, it could be I'm running out of money and my expenses are high and I'm going to lose my house and all that kind of stuff. I said if you're talking about that right now, you're adding that energy into your job search, that negativity into your job search. They'll when they come to talk about a position that they had and they try to explain why it was working or not working. They'll talk about, well, this boss didn't listen to me, and on and on. They'll bring those. Anytime you break something that brings any kind of negative energy, you may not see it, but somebody else will see it. Those are realities. But in the job search, you have to just focus on who's the company, what are their goals, how can I add value? If you stay 100% focused on them and their needs, that's the way to get it. This other stuff, they're not thinking about it. They don't want to hear about it. So unfortunately, that's the way that works.
Yeah. And they were wondering, would you be able to just share your YouTube information again? There was some interest in that.
Okay. Actually, if you just say Bob, go to YouTube and type in Bob Franco. I can show you what it looks like again on the screen here. Am I still live on the screen?
Yeah, you're still live.
Okay, let me go back to that page. Sorry about that. There it is. So so there's my YouTube. That's what my picture looks like with the sunset in the background. So just look at me, and I have a whole bunch that are on there.
So we have another person here who said of 1983 alumnus. I cannot say strongly enough how important networking is, and she's agreeing with you on that. And is it possible to get your contact information? So they want to reach out to you.
Robert.franco@shu.edu. And yes, I would be more than happy to meet with anybody.
And would we be able to share the PowerPoint slides with the attendees, or
are you going to send them this?
I mean, so I just want to let everyone know that this has been recorded, and it will be posted again in the next few days. So I'd say take a look next week at the same page that you used to sign up for the webinars. It'll be at the bottom of the page. So I'd say take a look next week.
Perfect.
All right. Well, I just want to thank everybody for joining us today. And thank you, Bob, for having such a great presentation prepared for us. So we usually have a webinar each month, but next month we are going to take a break, and we're going to come up with some new topics for you guys for the next webinar series. So I want to thank everybody that has been tuning into all our webinars, and I feel like this was a good webinar to end our series on. So thank you guys, and I will see you guys next series.